Mm-hmm.
Let's get into one of the Falcons' biggest rivals in the division, the New Orleans Saints. Not much of a rivalry last year. Saints really struggled. They went 5-12 with Derek Carr, kind of leading the way at quarterback. But then he obviously retired this year. They don't have a clear QB1. So could you kind of talk about what you're seeing from that scenario right now?
Yeah, it looks like Shuck's going to win the job, and I think it's because Rattler just makes too many mental errors, especially when processing pressure and getting the ball out. We saw that a lot last year. I know a lot of people liked him coming out of South Carolina. I liked him, but I think he was like my 8th quarterback. I did not have him ranked that high for what I remember, but I think he's a fine quarterback and could do well in spot start situations. And I think Shuck is kind of in that same category. And Shuck's also 26 years old. I don't know how much more development you can get out of a guy who's a 26-year-old rookie. If it didn't work for Brandon Weeden when he was 28, yeah, he's 2 years younger, but Shuck, I think, is just like Rattler, a good spot starter. I don't know if he's ever going to be a franchise QB for somebody. I think this might just be a Band-Aid pick. But if you're taking a Band-Aid guy in a relatively weak quarterback class, I don't know why you used a premium. They used the 40th overall pick on this guy. And I like Shuck. I don't know if I like the value for what they took him at. I think there were 1 or 2 better quarterbacks in this class than him. But, this roster is just a mess even outside of the quarterback position. So no matter how Rattler and Shuck play, they could swap games. They could swap every snap. This roster is such a mess that I don't think it's going to matter what you try with them. You could play 2 quarterback. You could put 2 guys back there, put Alvin Kamara in the middle, and have the quarterback or the center direct snap to one of the quarterbacks. And I still don't think this roster is good enough to I think you could try that and get away with it because the roster is such a mess. It's counterintuitive, but I mean, if we look at this running back room, Kamara is clearly the starter, but they have some deep pieces. They have Kendre Miller, who looks like he's finally going to get a shot at some spell reps. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is who he is, but he's played well previously. I mean, Cam Akers is who he is also. Unfortunately, 2 Achilles tears is going to derail what was looking like a promising career. And then Devin Neal, a rookie out of Kansas, who I think is kind of not exactly like Kamara, but is of the same archetype as a running back. And I really liked him in this class. But I don't know who you're going to fill in when Kamara needs a breather, who you're going to put in. It's going to depend on where you're at on the field, the defense that you're facing. And I think that you don't get into a rhythm like that. When you're playing matchups rather than letting guys get reps and get comfortable in the offense you're trying to run. That works in high school and college, but in the NFL, that really doesn't. And then if we go further to the wide receiver room, Olave's good, but if Olave's out, Rashid Shaheed's a one-trick pony on deep balls. They just traded for Devon Bell, which we speak of old rookies. He's 27 as a sophomore in the NFL. I don't know why they traded for him, but they did. Mason Tipton has done really well in the preseason. Maybe he provides some juice in the pass game, but I'm not really sure what else they're going to do in the pass game. I mean, Jawan Johnson's fine. Taysom Hill's fine. But as far as pass catchers, I'm not really sure if they have a higher ceiling than any other team in this division. What were you going to say?
Can I throw a hypothetical at you? I mean, obviously we don't know. Olave's timeline is kind of weird this season, but say he was fully healthy, what could a healthy Chris Olave change for this Saints receiving core?
I think it ends up being a really good one because if Olave's playing, he's playing the X position, and I know he's a little undersized, but he's a damn good route runner, and he knows how to get open even in press coverage, right? Mm-hmm. So that allows them to use Devon Bell, who's 6'4", 6'5", and use him as a power slot, which is what the Broncos did. 70% of his snaps came from the slot, right? So I think that's going to be that's where he's going to play if Olave is, healthy. And then Rashid Shaheed will be the deep threat, and Mason Tipton will fill in the slot. And if Olave needs a breather, Tipton will fill in for him, or they'll move Bell outside because he's got the size for it, and Tipton moves to the slot, right? So, if Olave's healthy, I think the receiving room is actually pretty decent. But if he's not healthy, which is a big question mark, I think they aren't going to be as versatile as they want to be with some of the guys that they've acquired. And can I just say that the Bell trade, like, it's a 4th and 7th round pick, which is pretty much the same equivalency in terms of value as a 3rd round pick, which is what George Pickens got. Like, George Pickens was traded, or the trade value was a 3rd round pick for George Pickens. So you're saying that George Pickens, who's 2 to 3 years younger than Bell, is worth the same value? Like, to me, that just, this trade made no sense. And I think that they have some issues in their receiver room depth-wise, but for that value, I just didn't understand it. But anyways, and then offensive line, huge question mark outside of Eric McCoy at center. Trevor Penning is moving to guard, and we've seen a good track record of oversized guards moving into the inside of the interior offensive line. Kelvin Banks, who I projected more as a guard, he's going to be the starting left tackle. Talise Fuaga, who I really liked in last year's class, is moving to right tackle. But again, that change in position after your first year, there is a learning curve there, as we saw with Paris Johnson last year, who was locked down the second half of the season, but, struggled a little bit early on. And then Cesar Ruiz, who is, I'm sorry, he's not a starting guard in the NFL. Like, he's just starting because they don't have anyone else, and it's a shame that that's the case because I kind of liked him coming out of college, but he's just not panned out. So between in every level of this offense, the roster's a mess, right? And then defensively, the defensive line looks really good and is probably going to be, it's going to be above average and probably is going to be good, but they just have like Cam Jordan is there, who's like a good veteran presence, but is not the player he was even 2 years ago. Carl Granderson is an up-and-coming, really good edge player. Chase Young is not what he was. Field Diggs is a super interesting prospect out of Syracuse. And then on the interior, Brian Bresee, Davin Gacho, Nathan Shepard, Vernon Vernon, and Christian Boyd is a really good defensive tackle rotation, but I don't think any of them are good. I think all of them are above average rotational players. And that's kind of a problem where you don't have a true stud on this defensive line. You just have a bunch of above average guys who are going to rotate and play. We'll see how it shakes out. And they've shown they have a horrible track record for defensive line anyway. So who even knows if half these guys pan out the way that they should. And then quickly, just to wrap up the rest of their depth, Demario Davis is awesome, but I'm not really sure about anyone else in the linebacker room. We'll get into one of them later, but he has some of his shortcomings. And then this secondary is feisty, but not uber reliable. Like, Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to be a good starting corner for them. But Alante Taylor has been hit or miss throughout his career. Ugo Amadi, kind of the same deal. They added Julian Blackman after Tyrann Mathieu retired. He had a good rookie year, but, kind of hit or miss since then. So it's an interesting defensive group. I don't think there's anyone besides Demario Davis that is going to be a headliner on this defense. Maybe Kool-Aid McKinstry, because I liked him coming out of Alabama last year. I believe he was my number 3 corner in last year's class. But, we'll see what happens depth-wise. But this team does not move the needle for me, especially with that quarterback room.
Yeah, absolutely. And, looking around the roster, there was a lot of guys retiring from last year, right? And, nothing against those guys. A lot of them, it's like some really talented players. But it kind of feels like this Saints roster is one that really could have benefited from getting young fairly quickly. So for you, some of these departures, how do you feel like they kind of help just kind of open up this roster a little bit and help them kind of focus in on a much younger core?
It's the losses is the toughest part, right? Like it's snaps that you have to replace, right? And I'm not really sure if the only thing they can do is just let these young guys play and let them get reps and let them get experience. Like there is good depth here, and there's probably an extra starter or two somewhere, but the Saints really have to just bite the bullet and rebuild. Like I said with the Steelers last episode, like they have to, because them pushing for the Super Bowl for the past 4 years and trying to load up this roster has put them in the position that they're in. Like Derek Carr, retired. Tyrann Mathieu, retired. Ryan Ramczyk, retired. Marshawn Lattimore, really good corner. You traded away. Lucas Patrick is fine, signs with Cincy. Jamal Williams is released and still a free agent and is a good spellback. Kalen Saunders traded to Jacksonville. Willie Gay signed with Miami. Paulson Adebo, who had a great 2023 season, signs with the Giants. Like, the guys that you should be bringing back, like a guy like Paulson Adebo, like Willie Gay is linebacker depth. Kalen Saunders is a good rotational defensive tackle. Like, Lucas Patrick is lineman depth. Like, you don't need Jamal Williams, but he's a great locker room guy. Like, they're letting guys walk that they really shouldn't be letting them walk. And they're relying on guys who are older and past their prime and are just not good players. I shouldn't say not good players, but not as good as they were. And so, yeah, effectively, like, I don't know what Mickey Loomis is thinking. Like, he should have torn this down years ago when they were in cap hell. I think they were negative $80 million going into one season in cap space, which they worked that out. They restructured contracts. They released some guys that they had. But, like, that should have been the point. You got rid of most of these guys. Like, and I think the Derek Carr signing really, like, they didn't lose as much money as the contract said they were going to lose because of some of the injury clauses that they had and that they released him before a certain time, or he retired before a certain time or whatever. But, like, that signing in general just made absolutely no sense. And it still doesn't. And now they're in the QB position they are now, when they could have, taken someone else, just a flyer, had a high draft pick, gotten one of the really good quarterbacks from the 2024 class, and been in a much different situation, than they are right now. But the Saints are going to Saint.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, it's like, when you make a signing like Derek Carr, you're obviously trying to go for it's a short-term move, right? It's a little reminiscent. I don't want to say it's exactly similar, but it's a little reminiscent to the last two stops for Aaron Rodgers, right? But like you have to recognize that short window. So I guess it's good that the Saints did and Derek Carr did as well, and he kind of left after a year. But I want to get into their dark horse, linebacker Danny Stutzman.
Yep.
What do you like into this guy?
He's a really good run defender, and he's got NFL size to continue to be a good run defender in the NFL. And I think just the depth of the linebacker position, like, he's got a chance to take over some reps. Pete Warner's there. I don't know if Pete Warner is – I think he's more of a pass coverage guy than a run-stopping guy in this defense, so I think he can win those early rundowns pretty relatively quickly. In 2024, he had the second highest run defense grade among all linebackers in all of college football, with 300 snaps in that season. And if he can improve his coverage throughout the year, I don't think there's any reason for him not to start in 2026 with Demario Davis entering free agency. There's not much depth behind him. Maybe they bring Demario back for one more year, but the guy's 34, I believe. Like, he's on the very tail end of his career. Like, still a good football player, but like I said, with this roster, it doesn't make sense to bring someone like him back and try to run it back with the roster with so many holes as it has. But Stutzman, I think, is going to be solid. Like, coverage is not a strong suit, but I think playing with a guy like DeMario is going to help that.
Absolutely. And then the big question for the Saints this year, I mean, can they be competitive? Have they assembled a competitive roster this year?
No.
Or do you have – if no, let's just say, I don't know what your answer is yet. I kind of have a feeling what it is. But – no, but seriously, if the answer is no, I mean, do you feel like there's a timeline for competitiveness for the Saints?
I think you have to look 2027 and beyond. And I say that because
2 years.
2 years. And the reason being is that we saw that happen with, not to be a homer, but we saw it happen with the Cardinals, where they were, they stripped everything down with Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort came in. And now they're a team that might compete to win the NFC West this year, just, in their third year of tenure, right? 2 years later. We might see that with the Panthers this year. Dave Canales comes in, they strip everything down, they reset Bryce Young halfway through year two, which we'll talk about later this episode, next segment. And they're in a really good position to win this division. So I think the Saints need to look at other teams in the league, and especially in their own conference, and say, what are they doing that we're not doing, that they're able to recoup so quickly? And I think if the Panthers do win the division this year, they're going to be like, well, an interdivision rival stripped everything down, rebuilt this defense, retooled the offense for Bryce Young, and wow, they've become a really good team out of a team that was kind of a laughing stock even towards the end of the Cam Newton days, right? So that's going to be the key, is stripping it down, taking your losses for 2 years, even if that means Mickey Loomis gets fired. Like, whatever happens with him. Which I don't know if he can get fired, because I feel like if he could have been fired, he would have been fired way beforehand. But yeah, I think the New Orleans ownership is kind of hanging on to that Super Bowl win, and there's not much else happening outside of that. So I think if he could stay around, he will strip it down. But I think he wants to keep this running to keep his job as long as he can.
Dude, I was like 11 when that Super Bowl win happened.
Yeah.
I'm 27.
Yeah.
That's a long time to hold on to that, man.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That
was a great Super Bowl.
That was a great Super Bowl. I was pretty miserable during that Super Bowl, though, because that was when – well, I shouldn't say I was miserable, because I was pretty happy because I was rooting really hard against the Colts, because they obviously knocked the Jets out of the playoffs that year. But, man, that's an old Super Bowl to hold on to, for keeping your team relevant.